Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John with Coffee and a Bull here today to talk about Mike's reenactment of the mountain that is broken.
No.
And sorry,
I was hunting earlier. Come out the deer stand. Didn't see nothing.
nothing at all, guys. Today's episode is going to be called "Can't Rub Dirt in a Death Notification." What we're going to be talking about today is kind of the way that we were brought up on: rub some dirt on it, walk it off. All the
Suck
things,
it up, buttercup.
right? All the things our dads used to tell us to make us stop crying, get up, and move on with our lives, and how may have stopped the crying, but it didn't solve the problem.
Right.
So
No, it was one of the things, I remember growing up, and a lot of this was, it wasn't my parents being malicious. It wasn't that they were negligent,
right,
or they didn't care. But when we would take and hurt ourselves because we were poor, we were, my parents weren't trying to pay emergency room visits more than they needed to, because much like today, they make whatever number they want up for the emergency room visit. And that number's more than one, so my it wasn't really in the bank account that often. So
right.
but I remember we grew up, we spent some time out in the middle of nowhere, Alabama. We could be, whether it be playing dodgeball on a bicycle or whatever, random, racing go-karts or four-wheelers, flipping four-wheelers, whatever it was. As young boys, we would always get hurt. I mean, that's just nature of the beast. Whether it be rollerblading on concrete, slipping down and scraping your knee or an elbow. Cutting yourself with a pocket knife. At one point, man, we used to. I hope my son doesn't do this because it's dumb. But we were legit. There'd be 4 or 5 of us, and grew up in redneck town, Alabama. Everybody had a pocket knife or whatever, so we would take and stand in a circle and throw pocket knives at each other's feet. If you moved your foot, you were dumb or whatever it was. Whatever insensitive thing we could call you.
Oh, my dad is.
Now, granted, we didn't, nobody, believe it or not, nobody got stabbed in the foot, but we were always doing dumb stuff with, whether it be, pocket knives or whatever, and we were always getting hurt, and you busted elbows, busted knees, cuts all over the place, bruising and all this other stuff. And one of the things my mom did, and I remember there was one time I wiped out on this bike, it was, I think a ball rolled in front of the tire or whatever, and I tried to turn, and I didn't matrix it very well, I didn't dodge it. I hit
there was
that
no
ball.
tuck and roll. It was all slide.
I hit that ball, and I went over the handlebars, and I smoothed. I'm talking about both elbows, both knees, just scraped. I left probably a pound of flesh in that concrete, and I did the manliest that I could possibly do as 10 or 11, 12-year-old kid, whatever age I was. And I remember just screaming at the top of my lungs. And my mom's on the front porch of the house. She saw everything. And her thing was always, hey, come over here. She wouldn't come to us. And it wasn't, I don't think it was her being lazy. But that was more of her thing of, hey, take a moment, suck it up, and realize, hey, you can walk. You're not that hurt or anything like that. And granted, I never had a broken bone at the time, that time of my life, or anything like that. So it was always, it built that idea of, hey, just suck it up. Granted, it's going to look gnarly, chicken dick scars, and all that other stuff, that we get taught.
Which is such bullshit. I've never met a chick ever in my life that was like,
ooh, look at that.
Scars. Like, first off, Mel Gibson, you're a
Got
liar.
this appendectomy scar.
Right.
I still have my appendix. Just random.
I just want to know. Yeah, I'm impressed that you knew, number one, the appendage, and number two, that was the name of the surgery. I still have my appendix as well. I don't know how, but no, I never believed that adage that chicks dig scars. Never once in my life has any woman ever been like, "Let me see your scars, big fella." Like, it's never happened.
What?
I'm waiting for the hibachi to take off.
Nope.
It's just gonna gurgle.
I fixed it today.
No, we didn't.
But anyway, it was one of the things where you take and you suck it up. You ignore your pain. You ignore whatever tears you got going on, and the burning sensation, of you now have exposed nerve endings or whatever it is, whatever it is. You sucked it up, and that's where I remember growing up, like playing, whether it be baseball or whatever the sport was, like you would get hurt and you just, you grinned and bared it and,
Right.
and kept going on. And, kind of a lot of your older guys, oh, that's a tough kid or whatever. And you were looked at as being a tough kid.
Right.
But that transition later on into life, and I think that's where a lot of our downfalls come from, because you've got a bunch of guys who, are experiencing pain on a whole different level. You're not talking about a skinned elbow or something like that.
Right.
While that could be, relatively excruciating, it's not like, the guy who's going home, who, let's say it wasn't even, something like adultery or anything like that. But let's say, we deal with it all the time where we work fatalities in car wrecks. It's nobody enjoys them. It's not something that it happens. That's
Right.
just anybody with a driver's license
Part of life,
is
nature
apt
of the
to
beast.
have,
Yeah.
And so we deal with that all the time. Well, there's you got a guy who loses his wife and his kids or whatever in a car wreck. I worked one of those, and I remember just being heartbroken for this guy.
Right.
And how does that guy go home and rub dirt in it?
Right.
And that's kind of where the title comes from. Where hey, you don't get to rub dirt in a death notification. It doesn't just go away. It doesn't heal itself. A little bit of brown powder on it from the ground isn't going to make that heartache go away.
It makes me wonder where we crossed that over. And what I mean by that is like falling down, getting hurt, and dad or mom or somebody going, hey, rub some dirt on it. Or big brother going, shut up, they're going to hear us. Never did something like that happen where, because most of my childhood I lost somebody, whether it was my grandmother or my uncle or a brother or whatever, we lost somebody. Nobody ever came up to me and were like, hey, knock it off or stop crying.
Right.
Nobody ever did that. Nobody ever told me it
But you
wasn't
thought
okay.
they were going to.
Right. And so, like, you swallowed it down and swallowed it down and swallowed it down because you felt like that's what was going to happen. That's what was going to be said, or you'd be thought less of because nobody told you as a young man that it's okay to hurt. It's okay to cry. And I feel like we have done ourselves a disservice. And this is like we were talking about, you overcompensate for your children now because you get into that mind frame of like, no, there's times you've got to cry. There's, and we talk about it all the time, like, guys at work that we're out there, we're dealing with them and they're just broken up, but they don't know how to express themselves healthy.
Right.
It's always out of anger, like that dumb joke I made the other day about we're allowed to be hungry, we're allowed to be horny, and we're allowed to be angry. And that's the only three emotions that are expected of us. And I think that's because the childhood aspect is broken where young boys, young men, nobody ever tells them it's okay to emotionally talk. It's okay to have a comfortable place for you to open up and say, right. I'm hurt. I need to express myself. I need to, get this out. And I love my dad to death, but there was never a time, like I saw my dad cry one time, and it was when my grandmother, my mom's mom, it was when she passed away. And he didn't bawl like a baby. He didn't break down. I just, he had a couple of tears and then he was back to business. But it was in those moments, never once did he, come here, son, let me, give me a hug or there was no compassion
right.
in that. And I'm not jabbing at him at all. Like my dad is a great dad. He did the best that he could do. But, like you say, we never got a manual.
Right. They didn't get one either.
Right. And so it's something now that without even thinking about it, it's unconscious. Like I don't think to myself when I deal with my son, I don't say to myself like, hey, remember to be compassionate or hey,
right.
be softer or whatever. And I know we've talked about it in previous episodes. Like I pull him aside, like, the time I hit him in the face with a baseball because he wasn't paying attention and, didn't catch it. I pulled him aside and say, hey man, look, this is not the place we cry. This isn't it. Like
right.
when we get home later and you want to sit down and cry about it, you want to talk about it, I got you. But right here, we're at the ballpark, my guy.
Right.
There ain't nothing but other kids, and kids are brutal and savages. Like, this is not the place that we break this down. And, I didn't consciously tell myself, like, hey, let him know he can cry later. It was nothing like that. It was just, Nobody ever did that for me. Nobody ever stood there and was like, "Hey, bro, now is not the time."
Right.
Like, wait till.
Well, I know for me it was. My dad never said, "Hey, don't cry" or anything like that.
Right.
And you know, and like I said, we're not throwing any shade. We're not, saying, "Hey, your parents are horrible people" or anything like. I'm not going down that road.
Right.
But one of the things that happened is, and I think we were talking about it prior to filming this episode, was our parents were raising them excuse me, our parents were raising us for the world that they grew up in,
Right.
because that's all they had experiencing it, and so I know that my dad had a very rough upbringing, between, I'm not going to go into a lot of his detail because that's his story,
Right.
but between, having issues with his parents, he grew up very, very, very poor. At one point he was homeless, and when he did get, his grandmother took him in, she was dirt poor, and he grew up with clothes that didn't fit, things like that.
Right.
They couldn't afford school lunches at the time, and it was a time period where the schools really didn't care if you had the money or not. If you had it, you got food. If you didn't, you didn't. So
Right.
he went to school every day with he calls it a pone. I don't know what a pone is, but it was a thing of cornbread. That's all he had. That's what he ate every day. And so, they made fun of him for that, made fun of his clothes, made fun of, different things going on.
Does your dad
And
eat
so-
cornbread now?
Yes. He only eats a certain way though. But he had to grow up tough.
Right.
He had to grow up where he couldn't show emotion, because he was too busy fighting bullies. I mean, that was back at the time where they didn't have zero tolerance, bullying
Right,
policies or
right.
any other stuff. Like, hey, you dealt with it, you
Right.
dealt with your bullying, you moved on. And so, he grew up in that mindset where, hey, you don't get the opportunity to express your emotions and stuff like that. So
Right.
why would I expect him to teach anything other than that? And granted,
Right.
he wasn't a hard ass or anything like that on us as far as, hey, don't cry or any of this other stuff, as long as the timing was right. But I don't remember, at funerals. I don't remember crying at funerals, not because I thought, he would get mad at us or anything like that. But that's you're a guy. You don't cry.
Right.
You have to be tough. And that was a very difficult thing to learn.
Right. And that's my dad, his parents got divorced when he was little. I mean,
Right.
younger than my kids. And my dad's the oldest of 9. There's 4 with counting him with his mom, and then his dad went on to have 5 more kids. So being the oldest of 9, he's the biggest in his family. Like, my daddy's a big man. And honest to God, like, if he didn't look exactly like my grandpa, who's like 5'6", 5'7",
Right, you wouldn't think he was there.
like, I'd be like, nah, they ain't related. But my grandmother, she left Pennsylvania. That's where my daddy's family's from. She left Pennsylvania and went to California with him, his twin brothers, and my Uncle Jerry. And so my dad went from this, innocent little boy to, I'm now the man of the house. There is no, dad figure.
Right.
And I've got 3 younger brothers that I've got to be there for and be their protector and be their guardian or whatever. And now, don't get me wrong, based on the stories that my uncles tell me, he was a jackass. But he joined the military, and that, gave him that responsibility to be an adult and everything else. But raising me, he had no structural guidance.
Right.
He had no male role model. And so that's, in my opinion, that's why that man gets up before the sun. That's why he goes to bed after the sun. It's in his brain that his job is to get up, go to work, provide, here's your food, here's your clothes, here's your shelter. That's all you get. Don't ask for more, because I'm going to remind you what I gave you, and that's food, clothes, and a house. And I laugh about it now because we weren't poor. We had enough to pay the bills. Sometimes. That's the best way I can word that. Sometimes. And not my daddy's fault. It was my mom's fault. She was terrible with money. But going through, like, life, when I had a problem with something, my dad was not the dad that stepped in. He didn't like going to schools. He didn't like having talks with the principal or the teachers or the conferences or anything like that. It was always my mom. And that was a mean lady. Like, I'm not talking shit about my mom. She's, gone now. But if somebody had to go to bat for me, it was my mom.
Right.
If somebody picked on me at school, it was my mom in the front yard going, look, I'm a lefty, so let me show you how to get up with this left south hook, like south palm in the jaw. They won't see it coming because you're right hand. And I'm like, I feel like my dad should be teaching me this. But, when you're built like him, you didn't really need to know how to fight. People just didn't want to fight you.
Right.
Like, you're just such an ogre of a man. But so I think now that's why, like with me, with my son, I give him more compassion than I got. But I keep finding myself trying to find a balance because sometimes it's like my dad comes out in me. But then there's other times where I can be like, okay, I need to look this up on how to get through to him without you're going to listen to me or you're going to, catch a beating or not catch a beating. I wouldn't hurt him, but get disciplined in some way or another. So it's an uphill struggle, and I don't want him to lose the child he is because I'm too hard on him.
Right.
I know that he emulates everything I do. Like, he wants to be so much like his dad that I don't ever want to show him that I lack the ability to be or have emotions or talk about my feelings or, things like that. It's one of the big reasons, like, him and his mom, or his mom and I, were divorced. Can't stand her. That's the thing between her and I.
Right. But still his mom.
Right. That's still his mama. And I go out of my way when she's present to hold my tongue. I don't say the things I want to say. When she makes off the wall comments or does something that anybody else in this world would get told where their place was, I let it ride and I wait till she leaves and I send her a text message. I'm like, hey, you're going to cut that shit out. You do that shit in my house again, you ain't coming back. Knowing full well that I'm not going to do that. Like, because I don't want him to see it and be like, okay, so we don't like mama.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's how we treat our mom. Or that's how we treat the lady we had kids with or whatever. I don't want him raised like that.
Right.
I don't want him to have that thought in his brain. And it's a lot of people ask me when she got the flat tire, I went out, I changed the tire, I had both kids with me. There were some other circumstances with it, but, went and picked her up, drove her to her car, changed the tire for her, and sent her on her way. And my son is like, Dad, why are we doing this? Like, Mom can change her own tire. And it's like, that's not the point. That we're here. This is what you do. This is what you do for the whether we're married or not married. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to set an example for your kids so that they can set examples for their kids. And they have that core memory that I can dislike her with a passion. Doesn't mean I have to treat her bad. It doesn't mean that it's okay for anybody else to treat her bad. And so, my little girl, is the same thing with her. I want her to know that when she chooses somebody to be with, even if things fall apart, she should choose somebody who is still going to come and help her and still going to be there, pick good people, good partners. And it's, as much as this is a, you can't rub dirt on a death notification, it's really more of trying to identify where we lost ourselves as kids.
Right.
To become, who we are now, and how we take that message of just rub some dirt in it and reapply it in a modified way so that our sons don't grow up to be the men today who just get up at the break of dawn and go to work and come home and think I've fulfilled my obligation without the substance for everybody else in the house.
So I think, if we can get it back into, rubbing dirt on it. You remember scraping your knee playing ball, rub a little dirt on it because it kept the blood from going all over the place.
Right.
It helped it.
That weird medical coagulated.
You're going to get a tapeworm, but at least you won't. You don't need a Band-Aid right now. And so
bacterial infection.
I don't know that that's how you get tapeworms, but I feel like it's infection.
Close. It's close.
Infection at a minimum.
Right.
But it was, you did that because, one, you probably didn't have a Band-Aid, or first aid kit anywhere.
You couldn't
around,
afford it, right?
Or anything like that. But also,
did you
where
ever...
I do have to give it credit. We'll come back to that. I don't even know what you're going to say, but I know you're going to derail it.
Yeah, I probably will.
Where I will give that phrase some credit is it did teach you to
self-aid.
To stop giving more attention than was needed to something minor.
Right.
And that's Like my son right now, he'll get the most if he gets a splinter in his foot, because he won't listen to me and stop going outside barefoot. So he goes outside barefoot. We live in the middle of a swamp. He gets a splinter in his foot. Who knows where that splinter come from? There's no possible way anybody in that house told him, hey, if you go outside barefoot, you're gonna get a splinter.
Right.
No possible way that happened. Right?
Wasn't forewarned.
No, with no warning at all, out of nowhere, the splinter come out and attacked his foot. And I'm telling you, this kid would lose his mind.
Right.
He's not taking another step. He's screaming bloody murder. He is at the top of his lungs, red face. Tears going everywhere, and you couldn't do anything. To like, you almost have to hold him down and be like, oh, I got it, and you didn't take his splinter out. He still got splinter.
Right, just
but
get him to breathe.
You got to get him to breathe
right.
for a minute, And so I understand that concept being used to teach, hey, you can move past some of this stuff. You can be uncomfortable, you can be in pain, you can have this going on and still function and not have to stop life, stop what you're doing.
Right.
Keep having fun, go do all this. But I think where it failed was it was applied at a universal level.
Right.
And I know right now there's a lot of guys like, I didn't rub dirt on anything. Okay. We don't go get treated.
Right.
When, you go through something where there's divorce or death of a close loved one, or even just one stressful thing after the other. We don't talk to anybody. We don't go see a therapist. We don't go do anything. Other than maybe grab a 6-pack on a Friday night,
right,
and try to lose feeling in our face for a little bit,
right.
And we wonder why all of a sudden it's everything's going downhill. We can't find which way's up. And that's why we joke around about it. You see a lot of it on TikTok, and we kind of made a TikTok video just kind of making fun of it, but it's that saying, throw me to the wolves, and I'll come back leading the pack. And it's to symbolize, you're going through heartache, you're going through whatever. People have abandoned you, but you don't need them. You'll be able to come back and rule the situation. You'll come back stronger and meaner and everything else. And historically, that's not the case.
Ever.
You might have like the most abnormal example that if you hit Google or something like that.
Right.
But I think for the most part, it is the kind of understood standard that when we go through dramatic things, whether it be fighting with a spouse or a divorce or anything else, guys self-destruct. That's just how it is. We go quiet. We don't trust anybody else after that, and we think somehow by not trusting anybody else, all of a sudden that's going to make us a stronger person. No, it makes you alone. You know, and then you can only be alone so long before you don't get to pull yourself out of it.
Right.
And so we kind of made fun of that, but you don't come back strong. You don't. And if anything, you just wither away. And that's what a lot of guys are seeing themselves doing is, hey, they thought, hey, my wife left me, so I'm going to go hit the bar, find a couple chicks, line them out, throughout the week or whatever, and go about, trying to be Jordan Belfort, in Wolf of Wall Street,
right? And
that's not what happens. You don't get the happy, fairy tale ending or whatever. Instead, it just you become the creep at the bar by the end of it. And we deal with it all the time where we go to these guys' houses, and they hate everybody. They hate their ex-wife, which is understandable, but also they're just so grumpy. They don't, and they're by themselves. And if you were to have the opportunity to talk to any of them, they would. I promise you, they would go back and be like, "Hey, I wish I would not have taken the approach that they'd have taken. Try to go get some help. Try to do something else." But instead, they tried to rub dirt on a death notification or
and then
divorce.
they never came back and addressed the problem.
Right.
And that's you can rub the dirt on it for now, but you got to wash the dirt out.
Right.
You got to treat it properly at some point.
It's still an infection.
And a lot of us fall in that same category of we grew up poor. Hospital bills were expensive. And so when we look at it and we go, okay, I'm going through divorce. I'm losing my job. I'm doing, X, Y, and Z. And in your brain, we talk ourselves out of it. It's like, oh, I should go see a therapist. I really think that a therapist would help. And of the guys that we talked to before we started our podcast, that was my questions I would ask them. Hey, if you had the opportunity to go to a therapist, would you go? if it was group therapy, would you go, or what's stopping you from going? You know, those are some of the basic questions I asked. Almost every guy that I talk to, and I say almost, I'm almost positive I had 100% that would say I would go to a therapist. Right. I would talk to someone. Not too big on group therapy, which I can understand that. Every single one of them told me the same thing. It was either financially, they couldn't afford the therapy, or it was the stigma that if work found out that I was going to therapy, there would be a problem. And especially in law enforcement, right. Going to a therapist, it can be seen as a weakness. You can be seen as a liability. And that's not always the case. Right. You know, it's just not. And that's where you can rub the dirt on it for the time being. But you, like, in my situation, you know, I'd gotten shot at work. I came home, found out my wife was cheating on me. And it was the only solution that I had was get back to work. Go back to work, provide for myself, and show that I can pull through it. And in reality, I was not healed mentally from either incident. I wasn't healed emotionally from either incident. You know, and I tried to be the man to be like, oh, I've been shot before, I'll be all right. I've been cheated on before, I'm okay. And in reality, I was only out 10 days, you know, and then back at work. And they put me in a role at work. And I'm not talking trash on that agency, because they were trying to accommodate me, you know, and they're like, hey, you want to come back to work, but look, we can't put you in the role you had. We're going to put you in a separate role for now till you're able to do your job again. And that was terrible. That was the worst thing I'd ever done, was go back into that spot. And I did it for like 2 days, and then I took off, and I came back, you know, went back to regular work. But I wasn't ready. You know, I wasn't in a position to put anybody in danger necessarily, you know, because in some circumstances that would be a bad thing. But I was just rubbing dirt in it, because in my brain, if I can go back to work, I don't have to focus on it. I don't have to look at it every day and deal with that problem. I can just go back to work. But in reality, the best thing that happened, actually, as crazy as it is, was talking to your mom and dad, because, you know, your dad's a pastor, and it's pastor, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So it was talking to him and realizing, sitting there with them, and I love your mom, she's a saint, but listening to her hear our version of what was going on, and basically, you know, saying, hey, this isn't your fault. Like, you're not the problem. You know, you're probably not perfect, but you're not the result of this.
No, you're not
perfect. No, your mama said probably not perfect, okay? That it wasn't not perfect. It was probably not perfect. But anyway, it was that pushed me into going and saying, hey, well, you know, you didn't like going this religious aspect, because she was the, you know, religious one. She didn't like that because they pointed it out to her and said, you screwed this up. This is your actions. You need to take accountability for your actions and move on. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try a marriage counselor. Once the marriage counselor said the same thing to her, she stopped going. I still went for another 6 weeks, 7 weeks, twice a week, and talked to this marriage counselor. And it wasn't just the emotional things. It was, I got shot at work. You know, you get looked at like a jackass by some people that weren't there, and the people that were there that knew the situation were like, damn, dude walked it off. You know, and you have that flip coin in your brain, and you're trying to process all of that. And that helped, you know. I should have kept going. The problem was that young lady specialized in marriage therapy, not, you know, the trauma that I needed help with. And of course, I haven't gone back and gotten more trauma because we can't afford it. You know, that's, as a single dad, you know, that's not something in the budget, you know, and it's not something that you can call the phone company or the electric company, like, hey guys, not going to make this bill this month. Right. I got to pay the counselor so that I don't lose my mind somewhere. And again, it ties us into why we're here on this podcast, because our goal is to get the same thoughts and feelings that we realize we had out to the viewers, so that you guys can see you're not alone. You know, we all have those thoughts, from the I wish I had superpowers, to I wish I was a hero in this moment, to I wish that I was a billionaire, to, you know, the fleeting thoughts in the middle of the night when you're by yourself. You know, we all have them. You're human. You're not by yourself. You're not alone in it. But you got to break that habit of rubbing some dirt on it and forgetting about it, because it's just gonna trip you up down the road. And
I think that's one of the things, because I'm in a unique situation right now where I have been seeing a therapist for several months now,
Right.
and it's been a great experience.
Right.
And like we've said several times, I think hey, there's some therapists who are better than others.
Yeah.
You know, and I talked to several other friends of mine who have been going to this person, and they had nothing but great things to say. What I had going on, she focused on or specialized in that. So it's like, okay, this is somebody who's going
Right.
to be beneficial. But a lot of guys don't have that. A lot of guys don't have, they wouldn't even know where to begin.
Right.
Because if you're like, hey, look, okay, now I want to cross this bridge that I've never done before in my life.
Right.
You don't want your friends to know about it because you're worried that hey, they're going to think you're dumb, they're going to think you're weak, they're going to think you're broken.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the world we live in, everybody always has to play detective,
Right.
and try to come up with what's going on in your life. Hey, why does he need to go to the
Right.
therapist?
Why is he missing every Wednesday night?
Right. We used to play poker or whatever it is, guys do
Right.
nowadays.
Right. Never been invited to a poker
Never
game.
been to a poker game in my life. But it's you got everybody who wants to play detective and figure out what's going on in your life, and of course you're going to get the blame. Hey, your wife left you, so obviously you did something wrong. I bet you
Right.
stepped out.
Right.
And you get all that going on, and so you have a guy who finally decides, hey, I'm going to reach out and find somebody to talk to. Where does he go from there?
Right.
And that's one of the things that there's got to be somebody out of the three people we have listening to the podcast. There's got to be somebody who's like, no, that's right. I don't know. You wouldn't know where to go.
Right.
You don't want to just Google, hey, who can help me with mental health?
Right. Well, and that's the other issue too, is you yourself have a problem, but you don't know how to identify your problem.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I sent to Mike today was a picture, was a screenshot I saw on Facebook, and it was a Google search, and it said what to do if your husband's yelling at you. And underneath it was the national phone number for domestic violence victims. And then right next to that picture, it said what to do if my wife's yelling at me. And it was like a whole laundry list of like, could you try doing this or maybe reapproaching this?
You thought about the tone and what you
Right. And it's like, if we were to Google, hey, I've got a mental health concern, or I'm going through this situation into Google, you're going to have to go through 50 ads.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to go through the Reddit, the all the other miscellaneous billboards or whatever where they post this stuff at, just to try to find local counselors
Right.
who may be able to help. And a lot of the problem is a lot of guys don't understand that there's actually a process to getting you to the right mental health therapist. And the way that I found this out was through my divorce and seeking a marriage counselor. Was I actually had to go to I went through the counseling. The place that I worked did not cover marriage counseling. So I had to pay for it on my own with my private insurance. But they send you to it's like I don't think it has an actual name. It might. I don't know. But it's basically a counselor who sits down and talks to you and says, why do you want to see a counselor? You give them...
Kind of like a triage type person.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
So you give them your information as far as like, this is what's going on. This is why I feel the way that I feel. This is, certain steps or phases that I'm going through in my life. They get you geared towards the right set of people. And if you go to the right ones, they usually come out with, hey, look, we've got 3 people who have availabilities. They specialize in your thing. And the way that it was recommended to me was go sit with this person for 2 sessions. Do your first one, because that's going to be awkward. That's really, you're just learning names and getting basic backgrounds. After the second session, if you're not satisfied with that person or you just don't feel like that's your person, go to another person. I know for me, it's a mental blocker. I don't do well with male psychologists. It's not a sexist thing. It's just that stigma is there, and I don't feel comfortable looking at another man and being like, oh, this is why I feel like a weak man, or this is why you don't have it. Whereas with female psychologists, I feel more comfortable opening up and talking to them, and that's something that I think our viewers, if you're going to seek mental health, that's what you need to do. Go sit with a, as Mike called him, a counselor triage, and get geared and pointed in the right direction. Because there are people that have that knowledge of what counselors do what. Because each counselor has a different, topic that they're kind of, what's the word? Not fascinated by, but they're basically, that's what they specialize in. And those are the ones you want to go. Because obviously, if you're having problems in your marriage, you don't want to go to like a sexual assault counselor.
And that's what I found out. Had I listened to the first therapist that I went to, it was work related at a prior agency. I got sent to them twice, and two different doctors at that place. But they specialized in mental rehabilitation for drug addicts.
Right.
People who had an
something
addiction.
You want to tell me?
No, they had an addiction, and they got sober. But as we know, there's a lot of chemical things that take place. With when people are addicted for an extended period of time.
Right.
It alters your brain, and so they focus on bringing that back. And they use medicine and some other stuff, and they try to build back a sense of normalcy as best they can. Well, I go there, and it's a place that specializes with drug addicts, and I'm not downplaying drug addicts who are trying to get help. I'm not doing that.
Right.
But that's not what I was there for.
Right.
I was there for a work-related incident as a law enforcement officer. It's probably not the best.
Right.
Group of people. We're not going to rub shoulders the same way. But they and that wound up being, both those sessions were the worst.
Yep.
Worst mental health episodes I've ever had, and so you've got to find the right person for it, or else you're not going to get any help. And you're sitting there. It's in the same way you don't put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Right.
You can. It might
Good
help
luck.
a minute.
Right.
It's not going to solve anything. And so you got guys who their life has changed. They get a call. Hey, your wife, wrecked going down the interstate, going to work or whatever. And now you got to try to find a way where tomorrow morning when you wake up, your entire world's going to change. You've now got to figure out how to get the kids to school. I don't know how to do all that.
Right.
I don't know. I couldn't even tell you where my son's, his health insurance card is.
Right.
I don't know what he's allergic to or any of this other stuff. And so, for a lot of guys, we don't know all that information. Our wives take care of that for us. So if you could imagine her being gone, it's like, okay, now I've got all this that I've got to do now, and you get too busy. Like you said, when you had your incident, you didn't have time. You had to get back to work. You guys got to get. A lot of guys have had to get back to work, and they don't know where to go. And so rather than, hey, I'll take care of this later, you just push it down and you ignore it. You go on from there, because obviously, hey, it's not hurting right now.
Right.
So what do you do?
Right. Well, I mean, and that was like right after that incident, they sent me to a similar counselor, and I found out later that the counselor wasn't there for me.
Right.
She was a insurance liability counselor, so her job was just to check the box and say, he's good to go back to work. Like, there was no healing process. There was no... It had nothing to do with my mental state. It had nothing to do necessarily. It had everything to do with my mental state before the
Right.
company. It had nothing to do with whether I was good to go or not. It was to make sure that I wasn't going to become a liability down the road.
Right.
And so, like you, it was a terrible experience. Like, all it told me was I had no friends, I had no hobbies, I didn't eat good, and my sleep was all jacked up.
Right.
It was like, thanks.
Well, I think one of the things that I've kind of embraced a little bit is initially I didn't want anybody to know I was going to see a therapist.
Right.
Like, I didn't broadcast it to people, or anything like that. But I know that I've got guys that look up to me, specifically in our line of work.
Yep.
Guys that I've trained, guys that I've worked alongside, that I might have been able to alter how they worked a little bit to be either better at their job or take a different approach or whatever.
Right. Viewpoints.
Changing viewpoints and stuff like that. So, I've got several guys that look up to me, and one of the things that I do, like, they ask me, hey, what's going on? How's everything? Okay, well, I'm actually on my way to see a therapist or whatever, and I would make sure that I let them know that, hey, this is what I was doing, because it's only a matter of time, not even just in our line of work, but across the board that, hey, you need this in your life. And I don't want them to think that, hey, somebody they looked up to was, he was man enough. He didn't need to go see anybody. Like I want to try to break that stigma a little bit. And I got a phone call a couple weeks ago from a mentor of mine, Scott, and we're eventually going to try to get him on as a guest. But I was talking to him about it, and he'd asked me, hey, what do you have going on? And so I told him, I said, look, I'm seeing a therapist, and he's like, great, man. And he starts talking to me, he's seen a therapist and spent, I don't think he still does now, but he's like, hey, I had a season in life. I needed this. He said, I had another season, where, and I'll let him tell his story, but it's one of the things where when the communication breaks down from, as the generations go down, or from mentor to mentee and on past that, when you start breaking that down, and that doesn't include, we get taught how to do our job, right?
Right.
How much training? We go through
hours.
There's this idea that you go be a cop, go to the police academy for 6 weeks, you cut loose, and you do. No, there's so much more to that.
So much every year.
Well, it's you got the academy, which I think is now up to like 20 weeks or something like that. Some places it's 6 months. But you have that. Then you have the FTO programs, the field training programs that are just
right.
they could be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. Some of them are a year. Probationary status, and you got to do all this extra stuff on top of state mandated. Extra
right, the online training, the hands-on training,
and so you're constantly doing all this stuff, and so we learn how. I know that the moment I walk out of my door to be at work, I'm in a whole different mindset.
Right.
I've got Mike at work. I've got Mike at home. Mike at home stays at home. Mike, when it's time to go to work, a different personality comes in. We're bipolar, and so I walk out the door. I've got my uniform on. All my equipment's been checked. I've got everything that I need to work for that. Flashlights are charged because we work night shift. Flashlights are charged. The taser's been checked. Got my baton. Got boots. Whatever. Everything is the way. My uniform is the way it needs to be. My unit, patrol unit, has gas in it, or is going to have gas in it shortly. Whatever it is I need. My radio's charged. We know to get equipment set up before you even go to work.
Right.
If you're a mechanic, you're going to have your sockets and wrenches and whatever it is that don't deal with because y'all waste time and just charge people for it.
You're welcome.
So it's a familiar concept for guys. Hey, you have to have your stuff for work.
Right.
When you go to work, you have to know what you're doing.
Right.
You have to know how to handle the situation. If again, like a mechanic. Hey, if I got an engine that's knocking, I need you to know what it is. I don't need you to spend 6 days on YouTube trying to figure it out.
Right.
If we get called to a house, we're expected to know how to handle whatever that situation is.
And handle it when it changes.
Right. And then you have the after effects. Hey, you got to send. For some guy contracts, you got to send billing out. You got to type up reports at work for us. Everybody's got pre-work, at work, and post-work things that they've got to do.
Right. What you got to do to get to work, what you got to do at work, and what you got to do to go home
finish
from
up
work.
Right.
Yeah.
We go through training for every one of those stages, except for we do not ever train how to go back home.
Right. How to turn it off.
And this is for law enforcement, it's hey, you're stressed out. You just saw whether it be a bad wreck or a shooting or a stabbing or a drunk guy beat his wife, drunk wife beat her husband. We'll throw that one out there.
Happens.
Kids ran away from home. You deal with all that, and then you got to turn around and go home and then play daddy.
Right.
Right through the door. Hey, get them ready for school. Make it pour his Lucky Charms or whatever it is in a bowl. Get them ready to go to school. Give them hugs, and you got to try to shift off what you've experienced for those 12 hours prior to it. And it's not just unique to law enforcement. Same thing with, honestly, any first responder, but you got doctors, you got nurses, mechanics, you stress at work. We don't get to leave, is fairy tale as we'd like it to be, where, hey, work stays at work and home stays at home. Home rarely ever goes to work. We know how to shut that bridge off. We can keep our family from having or being brought into, the last thing I want is my coworkers busting my balls and making fun of my wife or making fun of my son or whatever, you know. And so you keep that divider line.
Yep.
But work always makes it back into the house, and it's whether it's just talking about your day with your wife, or just stressed out. You know, I remember when I was doing contracting work, rebuilding houses and stuff. I was at home, but my brain was always focused on what the next job was going to be. Was sheetrock more expensive this week than what it's expected to be next week? You know, what was lumber prices at? You know, if I've got this coming from this job, I could pay this job, and so it was always, you're always distracted with work at home, and we don't ever get taught how to turn that off.
Right.
You know, you don't ever get taught, hey, there's got to be a divider line, and you can't just go, hey, today, you know what? I'm going to go home. I'm going to sit in my recliner. I'm not going to think about work. It doesn't work that way.
Nope.
Because you haven't properly learned how to manage your brain.
Yep. And nobody teaches you how to break that to your family,
right?
So that they can do it. Now, some men and women have a better relationship or communicative relationship than others. You know, some women can look at their spouse and say, he's had a bad day. I don't care about the things I've asked him to do. Some don't. Some don't have that. You know, some relationships, the partner is so wrapped up in something else, they don't pay attention to it. You know, they miss it that day. Mm-hmm. But like I know when my incident, when my son had gotten home, you know, he was young. He was like 4 at the time, I think. I remember I had this big old bandage on my leg, and he came in, and all he knew before coming in was Daddy got hurt at work. And he's my sidekick. You know, he comes in there and he's, Daddy, you okay? I'm like, yeah, buddy, I'm good. Because I don't want him to see me look weak, you know, and he's, you got a boo-boo? I'm like, yeah, buddy, I got a boo-boo. What happened? I was like, that bad guy got me. And he was like, you get bad guy? I'm like, okay, calm down, killer. Like, what are we doing here? And so, you know, it ties me into his understanding at that age. And I have to turn that off. I can't be mad at that guy. I can't let him know that I'm angry at the guy that shoots me, you know, because I don't want that to pass on to him. I don't want him to have a hate in his heart at that age, you know. And it was cute because he ended up the rest of the day, he put a bandage around his leg. Like, I've got a picture of it where we're just laying in bed and he's got his little bandage leg. But it's hard to do that, you know, and that's why, like, some of us, we have those days at work that we get home, we sit in that driveway for that 10, 15, 30 minutes, you know, just trying to come down. And it's like, I don't want to walk into the house with this weight on me, because this weight needs to stay in this car. It doesn't need to go into this house, because that's how my work demons become my home demons. And then the family has to deal with that, you know, and that's, It's a hard balance because nobody teaches you how to come home.
The demons you have in the driver's seat of your car do not need to know where your recliner's at.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. We keep those demons separate. We don't, you know, it's something you can leave. It was something I saw. I don't remember if it was a movie, a TV show, whatever, but there was a tree in this front yard or whatever, and the lady, like, points to it, and she says, your daddy planted that tree 20 years ago. And when he planted it, he told me it would grow on all of our problems. And the young girl or whatever, she's like, what do you mean, Mima, or whatever they call old ladies. And she goes, every day when he comes home from work, he stops at that tree. And he grabs a couple of leaves, and he wipes all of the day's problems off on that tree. And about that time, you see this old man coming up. Sure enough, he grabs the leaves, and he wipes them off. And it's when he talks to the grandson later, and he explains the same story, he goes, I'm just getting rid of the problems. I stop right there at that tree, and I give it to that tree. And I tell the tree about my day without talking. I get it out, and I talk to the tree. And it literally, like, when it showed him in both clips, you don't really pay attention until the second clip, but he's legitimately holding the tree, and he's talking to the tree, telling the tree about all the things, all the stressors, everything else. And he's, you know, this tree at this point is now this massive tree, you know. Right. And he said, that's how I keep a happy home. I leave everything with the tree. He said, if I got to pick it up in the morning, I'll stop on my way and grab it. But once I leave it with the tree, it doesn't come in the house, you know. And so I think that's another option or something, however you want to look at it. Because you can rub dirt on it.
I think as nice as that analogy is, you're talking about it.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
that's, I think that's where the male brain has kind of shut off, because
Right.
hey, you take it in, you don't talk about it, push it down, find something else to deal with. And so when you do finally call your friends, or call your brother or your dad or whoever it is that you confide in,
Right.
you talk about the weather, you talk about the upcoming fishing trip, you talk about all this other stuff, but you don't ever bring it up. The grandpa in that scenario is taking in, he's discussing his issues,
Right.
and that's a lot of way your brain starts working through it is by talking about it, and
Right.
to something more than just to inside your brain,
Yeah. Stop playing it out up here. Start letting it come out your mouth.
Right.
And once you get comfortable saying it, see those people that are opening that door for you.
Right.
And saying, "Hey man, you don't look good. What's going on with you, or what's
Right.
up?" Take the opportunity. Don't trauma dump. Don't just go out there and lay your baggage out there. But ease into it, and eventually, if enough of us start doing it, all of the other diehard guys that are stuck with a bottle full of every painful thing in the world, eventually they'll start to unscrew that cap and let that emotion out, and let that pain and that suffering out. And we're not striving for a softer male generation. We're not saying that at all.
And that's the thing, man, is we're not trying to take the Miss America approach of I want world peace.
Right.
That's
No.
not what we're
No.
trying to.
Yeah.
It's just trying to normalize talking about it.
Right.
And that's because that's where you get the little bit of, I don't think I'm going to go down that path.
Right.
And that's where that's the goal, is just, hey, find another route.
Yeah.
Understand that, hey, you're not the only one here, and maybe we can address something that way. But yeah, I don't think, we're not pushing, to be this big
Softer man. Like we fully.
The world needs warriors.
Right. Right.
But then it needs good warriors. And,
Right.
Guys who aren't going to just leave everything and then not know how to function afterwards.
Right. And that's where, like we had talked about the other day, if the United States government could find a way to appropriately address the male traumas and battles that we fight mentally and emotionally, you could keep and make stronger, fighters, and keep your active military, and keep your good cops and your good firemen and stuff like that, because you have an adequate way to handle the traumas that we experience. And granted, we know we're going to experience it, and I say that. To some degree, you don't know. To some degree, you don't know what trauma you're about to walk into. Yes, it's your job to respond to these high-stress calls, but you don't know what's behind door number one. You have no clue. And some days you walk in and you just go, oh, shit. This isn't what I expected to see today.
Redo.
Right.
Can I start over?
Dispatch in somebody else. I'm not here for this. And so we're not advocating to weaken the male masculinity. We're not saying don't be a warrior. We're not saying don't, for some of you out there, don't be an alpha male or whatever. But you've got to remember that you can't always be the strongest rock in the world.
And that's the thing, is when you look at how many, between first responders and military vets and even just regular guys, how many very strong, very determined guys who check out.
Right.
And if you could, the goal is not to tell them guys, hey, look, to prevent this from happening, we're going to eliminate what you've done, hey, for like soldiers. Whether we're taking the politics out of why we were in Afghanistan,
right?
Taking all that out, looking at a basic picture. High school guy signs up in the military, goes overseas, gets shot at, does some shooting, comes back home. He's got some demons, and he ends his life. Right? That story gets told
1,000 million times. Yeah,
but it changed. That's the basic nuts and bolts of it. Rather than saying, hey, we're going to eliminate the ability for you to go from high school into being a soldier, because that part's needed.
Right.
You can't eliminate the ability or the need of going into the battlefield. you've got to find a way where, hey, he comes home, he gets the attention that he needs.
Right.
You don't get, hey, 3 to 6 weeks and surprise you're off on your own.
Right.
Oh, by the way, the VA will get with you and get you some medical help in 6 months or a year or maybe
right when
maybe
they get
3
around
years
to
it. When they get around to it. In the meantime, here's $25 for a bottle of Jack.
Right.
And
self-medicate will get to you.
I wonder why we go down this road.
Right.
And so the goal is not to say, hey, don't go be the soldier, don't go be the cop, don't go be the fireman or the EMS worker, don't go be the guy who's who's doing all these very high risk jobs. But you got to have those type of guys.
Yeah.
But you got to also change the way you're teaching them of saying, hey, this isn't going to be all you do, because you got some great guys in the military. Let's transition to law enforcement. You got a lot of guys I know that spend 5-6 years in law enforcement, and they're like, hey, I'm done. I'm walking away. I'm not doing it anymore. Had there been steps in there where you didn't have to wait till a critical incident to get mental help, and if it wouldn't have been, you wouldn't be ostracized if you got it, then we might have had somebody who was a good cop stay for the 20 years.
Right. Not only stay for the 20 years, but be able to affect future officers and future families and people that they come in contact with. Because the upside to therapy, the upside to transitioning into good mental health is that with you seeking it for yourself, you set an example.
It on too. Right.
You set that example. You show those younger guys that it's not wrong. And it's not something to laugh at. It's not something to judge about. Cause I know if somebody made a joke about you going to mental health, you would.
I don't care.
Right. Like, it works for me. It's handling business. I know that we would have a different approach, because if somebody ever cracked a joke about you going in front of me, I'm probably going to punch them in the mouth, because who are you to make fun of somebody for seeking help?
Right.
And so not only do you take that and you show that younger generation, be it military, be it law enforcement, whatever, you show them that this is not an abnormal thing. This is something good. This is something healthy to be a better you. But everything you learn in that, you pass on to the next mental health call you go to, where you have that guy or gal that wants to end their life, and you go, hey, you know what? Let me tell you about what I learned. And this is from me, and despite what other people think, they see law enforcement, they see the military, and we're looked at in a different regard than just an average person. And they see and they go, well, this guy's somebody higher up in society in terms of honor and whatnot, and they're seeking mental help, and they're telling you, hey, these are the steps that I learned that helped me make it through these processes, and back to that young kid where I told him, hey, man, life's going to kick you over and over and over again.
Right.
There's nothing you can do but take those blows. But there is something you can do to make those blows hurt less and make yourself stronger, both mentally and emotionally, but also to move forward. And it's, in my opinion, I think that society as a whole, because believe it or not, America leads the world in higher rates of checking out than most other countries. We've got to have a better adaptive way of handling it, because it's a positive thing. And we both understand and we both know that the world, especially our country, needs first responders, and we need solid military personnel. We need those guys that rub dirt on it, keep fighting. But we also know that we need those guys to have a good treatment plan on the way back in.
And I think that's the thing, is if you got the guys who can take and rub dirt on it and keep going, but we want to tell them, hey, thank you for doing that, and you turn your back.
Right.
Well, they need help cleaning that out.
Right. Here's your free meal at Arby's,
They need help getting the dirt back off and actually getting the trauma addressed. Whether it be down to the bone or is it just a surface scratch. We don't know. We got to find out.
I got an idea for anybody listening. On Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, and I think President's Day, there's always a free meal or a free discount or whatever in all these retail stores. Okay, I know Outback, you can go get a free bloomin' onion and one meal as a veteran on these holidays. Mental health professionals, why don't you offer a free screening? Let these guys come in and have that opportunity to talk to you. You may not be able to get them to pay you full price, but you may get somebody who really needs some help and offer them a better deal or something like that, because most of us men aren't going to get medical help because we can't afford that.
I want to say, and this is where I may be wrong, I know that one company I worked for had very affordable mental health rates in my insurance policy. So you're paying for it already. And so a lot of people, if you could take in, for your employers, if you could take in, hey, if you have this available, let your employees know that it's available.
Especially if you're in a job field that those guys are going to need some mental health at some point, and I would implore most business owners, most guys that are in that charge, of the field, make a mental health day a thing. Give your guys that opportunity to say, I just need a day to check on me, and let them have it. It's in my opinion, being on the bottom of the totem pole, looking in several points of my life. If I had ever gotten looked at by the boss and said, "Hey, you gonna take a mental health day today? You're gonna go home. You're gonna do just you."
Well, no, normally it happens, but what the way it happens now is, hey, pack your stuff. You're going home. Come back next week. So you get suspended.
Right. That's the story of my life. I got that one in the bag.
But and all joking aside, obviously this is something serious. I don't want to keep beating a dead horse with it right now.
Right.
This is going to transition into our next episode. It's going to be titled Monsters.
Right.
That it'll be dropping next week, and it's going to be we're going to talk about, hey, one, there's a fascination with guys with monsters, whether it be Bigfoot or werewolves or vampires or whatever. The movie industry makes billions of dollars.
Mine is zombies
every year about it. And so we've got all those. Guys have zombie apocalypse plans.
Oh yeah.
They know what weapon they want to use and all this other stuff.
I can make it to Mike's house in 16 minutes.
We're going to be joking around about that. But we're also, because, hey, we're not necessarily a joking podcast. We're not here just for humor. We're also going to reference, or show, hey, there's a point where the little boy that you had,
right, that innocent child inside of you,
that, there's a part where you don't remember exactly when it happened, or you may, I don't know. But he transitioned into the person you are now, where,
right,
for a lot of the people that we deal with who's reached out to us through text message and phone calls, because nobody sends us emails ever.
Sons of bitches.
Still hate y'all. But they're like, at some point, I became the biggest monster for myself. We become our biggest critics, and that's why one of our friends told me, he said, hey, I'm going to pray for you that you are able to show yourself the same patience and that you're trying to show to other people,
right?
Because we become our biggest monster.
Yeah, and that's not a it's not a euphemism for us saying that we're monsters and we're badasses.
No.
It's that honestly, the monster we were scared of as kids is not anywhere near as scary as the darkness that we find ourselves in.
Right.
Inside of ourselves. And so we essentially become monsters to ourselves, and it's scarier than the boogeyman. It's scarier than a zombie apocalypse. That's where that episode is geared towards, is you becoming somebody and not realizing when that transition started to happen,
right,
and when it went full on, like there was no coming back from it, and that's the way you feel, and how to break that that cycle of events, so that your sons, you can continue to help them be that little boy, that innocent, adventurous, wild child. Right. And so with that being said, number one, we hope everybody enjoyed their Thanksgiving. We've got Christmas coming up. It's right around the corner. Don't be a Grinch. And leave us a comment about Mike's stupid outfit.
Yep. Leave us a comment. Send us an email, coffeeandthebull@yahoo.com. We do want to hear from you, whether it's, hey, great job. Hey, this is helping. This is not helping.
Why can we only see Mike's face and hands?
Whatever it is y'all want to talk about, send us an email. That's what we want to hear. We want to be able to reference. If you haven't done so yet, stop being lazy. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the share, comment,
Follow, like,
whatever it is.
all that.
All those different things. You
can catch us on Spotify, on Facebook, on TikTok. We're going to be on, or we're already on YouTube as well as Apple Music. So we're on every platform that you could find us, listen to us, everything else. And every single one of those platforms has the ability to share. So if you got a friend or you don't have a friend, you want to make some friends, find our followers, follow them, share everything out there to get our word out and our ability to help other people out that may need this information.
So for now.
Wait. You got to tell them where to email us.
I already told them an email.
No, you didn't.
Coffeeandthebull.yahoo.com.
What was it?
Toodaloo.
Stupid.